Some weeks the choice for what to review is a tough one and not quite as evident as we'd like it to be. This would be one of those weeks.
This is Frame Rate Studios' review of Road to Perdition.
In the movie galaxy of the YouTube universe, you've landed on Frame Rate Studios, your guide for all things movies. I'm Chad.
And I'm Corey. Road to Perdition is the 2002 film directed by Sam Mendes and starring Tom Hanks.
Hanks plays Mike Sullivan, an enforcer and adopted son of sorts for Midwest mobster John Rooney.
When Mike's son accidentally witnesses a hit carried out by his father and Rooney's son, Connor, it provides Connor with the opportunity to get rid of Mike.
But when the hits to take out Mike and his son both go wrong, the two Sullivans flee, setting out on a journey of revenge, redemption, and discovery.
Well, I'll go ahead and start this one off this week.
Okay.
Because I actually went and I read the graphic novel.
Okay.
And I will say the graphic novel is a lot more exciting, a lot more shootouts. I mean, way more shootouts and different action scenes in it. There are some other scenes where, you know, Sullivan, or O'Sullivan as he's called in the comics.
Okay.
And Rooney is actually called the Loonies. Good change of names on that one. But yeah, there's a scene where he goes and he robs not only the banks, but he robs the riverboat casino that he owns.
Interesting.
Or that Capone and all them own. The biggest difference between the graphic novel and the movie is Jude Law's character isn't even in there.
Okay.
He doesn't even exist. And the ending is completely different because Mr. Rooney, he goes to prison, and unlike the movie, his son, Mike Sullivan Jr., does shoot someone.
Okay. Interesting.
It's a big difference. And so for those who have read the graphic novel but not seen the movie, when you go to watch the movie, you may not enjoy the movie as much. For me, on the other hand, seeing the movie first, then reading the graphic novel, I liked the movie better because it wasn't so strung out.
Okay. That was one of the things I wondered, and I wanted to see how it did or didn't match, because the story missed the mark for me. And the reason it missed the mark for me is there was too many threads it was trying to cover in all this, too many stories, I felt. And so it didn't have the time to give the proper amount of backstory, like to, Rooney, played by Paul Newman, and his relationship with Mike, with Tom Hanks's character. Mike loses his parents when he's younger, and Rooney takes him in as his adopted son. And it would have been more interesting for me to get more of that backstory to understand better why there is this sort of contentiousness between Mike Sullivan and between Rooney's son Connor. What is that? What is the driving force behind really those three characters? Rooney, his son Connor, and Mike Sullivan.
In the movie, you get to see the acting performance of Daniel Craig's performance of Connor, who is this character that comes across arrogant and powerful.
2 weeks in a month. What can I say? So don't you ever talk to me that way again.
Deep inside, you also see he is very weak. He has no spine. And that type of dynamic is not in the graphic novel at all.
It's interesting because these are some pretty big story changes to make between how it played out in the graphic novel and how it plays out in the movie. And I guess that would be a question I would have. What was the thought of making such big changes?
The plot of it, of him witnessing the murder and then them being out on the run, that's the only thing that stays the same.
I think at the end of the day, why the story for the movie was a challenge for me was I understood that it was a story about fathers and their sons and their relationship. I get that was the point they were trying to make, but it also felt like they were trying to make some bigger moral point with the story, and I'm not quite sure what it was. And it got lost as to whose father-son story are we trying to tell here? Is it about Rooney and Connor? Is it about Rooney and Michael Sr., Hanks's character? Is it about Hanks and his son? The way it ends, it doesn't really, to me, have a good coherent moral point it's trying to make about relationships. There's not at any point that there's a real redemptive arc for any of them. I don't know.
Well, I'm doing a lot of comparison, the graphic novel to the movie. But what I think would have added to the movie is how the movie starts off with the narration.
There are many stories about Michael Sullivan. Some say he was a decent man. Some say there was no good in him at all.
Well, it is narrated all the way through the comic. He's writing out a memoir.
Right.
And it's as an older person. It's not as the kid. And that's where there was this confusion in the movie of like, okay, the way the story is being told is as though he's older, but the voice is of the child.
Right.
And then at the end, he's still a child. And I was like, okay, you needed to have more time pass. And I think one of the things that is said at the very beginning of the narration in the graphic novel, it says, my memories are a lot like people's dreams. They're in black and white. And I sit here, and as I was watching it, and I was thinking this would have been a great movie in black and white, just to give that feel. And then to read that, I'm like, that perfect opportunity to actually take another portion of the graphic novel and put it in there.
Real quick, before we move on, we'd love your feedback. Let us know what you think about this episode down below in the comments.
And if you like what you're seeing, give us that green light by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with your friends, your families, anyone you know, anyone you don't know.
Also, if you're already subscribed, make sure to hit that notification bell so you can be notified every time we release new episodes.
And one narration part of the graphic novel, which I would have loved to seen, because it was another kind of entertaining part, is when Senior is teaching Junior how to drive. As he's driving, doing that, the narration says, and I was able to do something that Mr. Rooney's thugs could never do. I made my dad turn white.
To build on your point about the narration, I think it would have been better with that, to have kept that thread throughout, because it would have been very much like my all-time favorite movie, or one of my all-time favorite movies, which is Shawshank Redemption, where you have someone narrating that all the way through. Because then, to me, if you have him narrating it and he can give kind of a capstone line of, and this is what I learned, or this is what my dad taught me, or something to that effect. Instead, we get the line at the end about his father didn't want him to follow the same path.
If they could have got the real, like now, Tyler Hoechlin to be there, I think that would have been great, because I think he's a really great actor. He would be a really, really good actor if people had used him earlier, because in this, I just love the expressions on his face. He just carried that character so well, especially when Mr. Rooney comes to visit him at the house right after the witnessing. Just the way he looks at Mr. Rooney. There's so much conversation in just his look.
I'm talking about the dice. A man of honor always pays his debts and keeps his word.
I'm going to be late for school.
But on top of that, what I was really going to go to say is, with Tyler Hoechlin, how does Paul Rudd get to be sexiest man before he does? But yeah, he's Superman now. He was a werewolf before. Yeah. Okay.
The thing that, while I may have had misgivings about the story, the thing that Sam Mendes did a good job of getting out of all those actors is just what you're talking about with his performance. It's conveying so much with saying absolutely nothing or very minimal. The scene where it's when he goes and when Connor goes to carry out the hit on, what he thinks is going to be Mike Sr. and Mike Jr., and it ends up being on Mike Sr.'s wife and his other son. And that look of fear that he gives, conveying everything without really having to say anything. Playing into that he really is scared and weak-willed and just not that confident in what he is doing.
There's another level of Tom Hanks's character that is in the graphic novel, which is a very small thing, but I thought would have been an interesting thing, is he's actually also known as the Archangel of Death. And I think that's just a nice little another depth of getting to know exactly how terrifying he is.
To give this another huge nod is the visual style of this movie is I think very beautiful, because
Make your choice.
while I think you're right, it probably would have been better in black and white. That would have, because sometimes black and white, when you take away that color, it helps to really, it emphasizes certain things you don't normally see. And I think that's what I would say about this, that it's not a very colorful movie, but it's still very beautiful. And it helps to convey the whole line he gives at the beginning, that it's 6 weeks in 1931 in the winter. I mean, you definitely, you get the sense of, we both are from the Midwest. We're in Minneapolis. You get very much that sense of this, dark, gray, overcast sense of just throughout. I really just love the visual style overall.
And that's interesting because I come from the different perspective of it. That is just so dry and dank. And it was like the middle. It's not like the cornfields are growing. It's not like there's beans in the field. It's all just flat land. If you like scenery of flat land in the winter, there's a lot of it as you drive through it. And depending on your perspective, because obviously we got one person who thinks it's attractive. Me, I thought it was a lot of time of drive.
Okay, fine. Be that way. I'm talking about things like the shot after they've essentially adjourned the meeting, and there is that shot that Tom Hanks is walking out of screen to go up the stairs, and it keeps focused on him, and then it pulls out and then goes to focus on Connor.
Okay, so the actual cinematography film of the actual action,
Yes.
not the B crew that they send out to go, hey, go get this shot of them driving down the road, get them. I will agree. All the actual scenes, that's why there is one scene in the graphic novel. I think it's all when Tom Hanks' character is, instead of walking out peacefully from meeting with Nitty, it turns into a shootout. Oh. And it's a huge shootout.
So yes, fine. It was the cinematography, not the shots, because yes, I don't need more boring shots of empty cornfields in the Midwest. You are correct. I can see enough of those on a drive from, here to Iowa. Yeah. You actually mean it's the cinematography. Yeah, okay, fine. And yes, I'm not talking about the camera B-roll that they shot. You are correct. So, my final thoughts on Road to Perdition. This has an all-star cast that delivers. It's very well acted by the entire cast. Their acting conveys so much especially when they say so little at times. Visually, this is very beautiful. Mendes, like I said earlier, has a consistent look he's using throughout the movie. Even though it's not a bright or colorful movie, I think it's still very well done. But my last point, it's spread a little too thin, in my opinion. The story's lacking because it has too many threads to cover. So it loses some of that depth. And, thanks to Corey's research, I think there are things that they could have included from the graphic novel that would have helped with that. And I think it leaves it without a true defining point or moral lesson it's trying to make, at least in the movie.
So my final thoughts on The Road to Perdition is, number one, I do agree with Chad, what he was saying. great cast, and the acting performance is great. They all carry their weight. They do a great job in it. You do feel the emotions from their facial expressions. They don't even have to speak at times. Next thing I want to say is this is slow paced. It's a very slow burn. It maybe is a little long for what the story is. Could have been a little bit shorter. So don't expect for a wild ride. That kind of leads into my final thought of it. My final thought is it is a good movie for what it is. But if you go in expecting a wild shoot 'em up mobster type movie like you have in so many other mobster films, no, this is a really strongly pushed drama film. So going in, it just depends. What are you going to do? What are you expecting? If you have that in mind, I think you're going to enjoy it. If you've read the graphic novel and you go in, you might be disappointed.
So with that said, what score did you give it?
I think my score really says exactly everything I've said. It's a great movie, but there's so much that's missing. I gave it a 57.
Wow, we are very in sync. I didn't give it a 57. I gave it a 55. For me, you know, too many times if I don't give it a great score, this is what comes up. For me, it's the story. You know, that's where the challenges are with this. So, you know, but that's wow, 2-point differences. We're in sync. As always, the cast of Frame Rate Studio thanks you for joining us on our trek through the movie galaxy of the YouTube universe.